So I'm going to talk about my own history in regard to leadership in terms of my past results, but in regard to forecasting in particular. I'm also going to talk about a little background in regard to health. This has to do with history and personal experience. So where do my insights in forecasting come from? Why, if you take 100 forecasters who all make forecasts, you're going to have some that are above average consistently, and some in terms of being more accurate, and some that are inconsistent or even consistently wrong. One of the factors I think that has led to my capacity to forecast accurately is my personal experience. I'm not sure how I'm going to even connect this yet, but my personal experiences. I guess actually not being especially wealthy, not being especially physically strong or healthy, not being especially connected or having titles and so forth. I had some honors and some titles academically in my youth, but part of it had to do with not being prominent in any of these common areas that I talked about in the previous segment. That led to me refining my own intelligence and insight, and really just thinking for myself, thinking independently, being perceptive. Not being perceptive in everything, because there's certain kinds of things like street smarts, or the term maybe social butterfly. There's certain kinds of perceptiveness that I personally might have below average, but there's certain kinds of perceptiveness that I have above average. And I was going to comment on my health challenges, as I could even comment on relationship challenges. There's certain things that have gone on in my life that have brought me to a certain sensitivity. So I'm going to talk about health a little bit. I had some challenges with my health, the most dramatic of which was the loss of the ability to walk. I also was sleeping 2 to 3 hours per week, and that all went together with a neurological breakdown, or a nervous breakdown, I could say, a mini seizure, mini stroke, actually. There are a number of terms that people might use for what went on. Fatigue is such an understatement. But I had an interruption to my physical functionality, and I was predisposed, as of that time, to be very sensitive to language and what works, and the language that certain medical professionals were using was not attractive to me, or even repulsive. Like, obviously, someone who says, well, I don't know how to help you with that, it's not especially attractive, right? And so I had a literally overnight recovery of the ability to walk, and also a very undistracted confrontation with the possibility of dying at maybe 36. Yeah. So that's somewhat unusual. Other people might have an immediate, like I've also been in car accidents or something. I had an immediate situation where there was desperation and urgency, tremendous danger, like a war or an auto collision or something like that. This was a period of physical deterioration of some sort, where I was expecting that I would. I don't know if I'd actually say I was expecting to die, but I was very. My expectations that I would live for a long time those were pretty much set us, dissolved, and those um, my presumptions that I would live were interrupted. I was left with this naked, oh, I might live, I might not. Not so much that I expected to imminently die, but that I was aware of that possibility. I had nothing, no evidence, no momentum other than that I'd been alive for however long to presume that I would continue to be alive for a long time. So I thought I certainly really could die and have that as an ongoing daily life experience, not just a moment or an hour or a day, but over the course of weeks. It actually wasn't an immensely long period of time, but over the course of weeks, I was confronted with the possibility of imminent death, and my own death. Distinct from being confronted with the possibility of other people's deaths. I've been around other people who I knew or expected. I actually did expect them to die, and they did die, just often because of old age. So how I actually got into forecasting was by way of astrology, and it was a study of cycles. So the basic cycles of day and night, of winter, summer, spring, and fall. These basic ways of thinking that cycles repeat is part of astrology. And with astrology, you have overlapping cycles of day and night. You have the seasons. You have the moon cycles. You have much longer cycles. All of these overlapping cycles. And when I say all of them, you're just counting 5 or 10 or 50. At some point, you just don't bother counting how many cycles do I need to track. So astrology can get pretty complicated. But it can be extremely simple as well. So by way of astrology, I was thinking in terms of cycles. I'm not really going to comment on how that transitioned into straight economic forecasting, but wildfire, there was a 500,000 acre wildfire the summer of 2002 where I lived. That also was an interesting thing where we were warned, the whole community was warned, lists of reasons why we were facing a potentially serious wildfire season. 2 wildfires started near the same time, both started by humans, one accidentally, one apparently not accidentally. Those two wildfires grew together into a complex, a single wildfire, and eventually 500,000 acres or so burned, and I was an evacuee. And I don't know what to say about that exactly, except it affected my perception of how other people think, how people respond in herds, the potential of panic, also the apathy in the face of warnings, and the creation over the course of decades, the creation by humans of specific conditions that lead to a sudden disaster. Disaster, by the way, is from the root words disaster, meaning bad stars. An odd little piece of trivia there for you. So from some developments with my health, the situation of a wildfire, I wasn't in any great danger, just it interrupted my life. But anyway, that development with the wildfire, it kind of kicked me out of just looking at astrology and prompted me to soon start looking at things like debt and entering long-term promises and contracts, as well as oil, where decade after decade of activity, like with the wildfire, decade after decade of activity clearly are pointing in a certain direction. Clear warnings are present, and yet people express surprise when there is a panic or a collapse or a breakdown all of a sudden. I was amongst the people who issued warnings about some of the developments. I'm going to specify 2008. It's not that 2008 was all that special of a year, but many things came to the attention of the public in 2008. A pretty short sequence of events with companies that went bankrupt, and were facing bankruptcy. Merrill Lynch, AIG, Countrywide, Washington Mutual, banks. These are just companies in the U.S. There are many other places where they had the same issues, basically. So those companies, they were not in excellent financial condition, 1 month, and then the next month were bankrupt. It was a long period of choices that suddenly came to the attention of the public. Just as with the wildfire, it was decades of interventions that humans had done that led to the conditions that produced a huge